Chapter 4. Playing whack-a-mole with my feelings. Leslie didn't really register on my radar until the day of our one-on-one date. For a little context, this was the second of 3 such dates coming on the heels of Joan's emotional exit. My head, already spinning, felt like it might explode. Dates was a misnomer. Each one was really more like the adventure of a lifetime. These were highly orchestrated day-long trips in stunning locations with over-the-top touches, such as a helicopter ride or a hot tub soak in the middle of the desert, basically senior citizen Disneyland. As I slipped on a new crisp shirt and my Italian loafers for whatever insane mode of transportation awaited me, I constantly reminded myself that I was a Midwestern bumpkin living the fantasy life of someone much richer and more fabulous. Even if Tony and I had had the opportunity to travel, it would never have been like this. What normal human being has the ability to do the things people do in the Bachelor franchise? Each morning, I thought of Tony. As I finished getting dressed, I would look at the picture of her that I traveled with and ask if she would approve of the woman with whom I was about to spend the day and my feelings for her. I transformed Tony, who knew me better than anyone else in the world, into a guardian angel. With my question, prayer done, I would put away her photo, compartmentalizing my feelings so I could be fully present for the day ahead. The first of these dates was with Ellen. The premise or theme of the day was the full princess treatment, of which she is very deserving. It started with her choosing a gorgeous gown and opulent jewelry to match, and then she had her hair and makeup done. After I picked her up at the mansion in a limo, we drove to a location frequently on the Bachelor Nation shows because of its ridiculously scenic 360-degree views of mountains and high desert. Because Ellen is warm, funny, and most of all authentic, I was pleased I got the chance to spoil her with some wildly expensive Neil Lane diamond earrings. Her genuine joy was unmistakable. That wasn't the last of the surprises. After a slow, suspenseful drive followed by a long walk to a hidden site, we crested a small hill, and Ellen saw the hot air balloon for the first time. True to form, Ellen was a real trooper, entering the balloon's basket over the top rail despite the hindrance of her formal gown. On the ride, she confessed to developing strong feelings for me. While there was a lot to like about Ellen, the chemistry I had with her didn't come close to how I felt with Leslie. Here's how I started off the entry in the journal I kept during my time on The Golden Bachelor. Wow. 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 And that didn't even begin to sum it up. The setting for the day was remote. Very remote. The high desert north of LA is apparently famous in the entertainment industry and has been the backdrop for many movies. I can see why. It is panoramic beauty. In the middle of thousands of acres of desert stands an abandoned wooden church that served as our meeting point. I rode my ATV over a hill, and there, amid the swirling dust, was Leslie. Smiling, clapping, and jumping up and down, she was the very picture of ebullience. Or a mirage. After safety training, which I, of course, appreciated, we geared up and rode off together on one ATV around a 2-mile loop that we circled 3 times. After we returned to the church, Leslie was outfitted with her own ATV. Gutsy, she wanted the chance to drive, which I admired. Still, I must admit I felt protective of Leslie. Her petite body looked out of proportion to the helmet and bulky ATV. But I needn't have worried. Hair blowing and beaming a 1,000-watt smile, she did great. The most exhilarating moment of the day didn't come while we were zipping through the desert, but rather when we were just standing around one of the four-wheelers like an old married couple. I wasn't looking at her and she wasn't looking at me, but instinctively, as if forces of attraction literally pulled us physically together, our hands found each other. It was an overwhelming moment, spontaneous, and so innocent. Another testament to the power of touch. As soon as we were holding hands, Leslie and I looked at one another with a common expression of recognition and disbelief. What just happened? I drove us to a magnificent tree, under whose welcome shade a bench with champagne and a rose waited. What I was most excited about was finally, after 2 weeks, getting a chance to talk to her, until we had our one-on-one date. I hadn't gotten a chance to know Leslie, who was reserved and vying for my attention when there was a pack of other women around. Who could blame her? That day in the desert, I learned she has a ridiculously good sense of humor and laughs at herself, easily, another quality I find attractive. Under the tree, we were at ease with one another as we spun through topics that ranged from her career to a full rundown of her favorite nightclubs in her hometown of Minneapolis. Everything flowed naturally, even when we got to the typically thorny subject of past relationships. She was open and honest about her 2 previous marriages and her thoughts on why they failed. Personal details that are for her to reveal if she chooses and not for me to share. Despite the heaviness of some of the subjects, including Tony and her passing, I was encouraged by the lightness of the moment. Even as we talked about the past, I could imagine a new present unfolding in front of us. I felt only excitement about being with Leslie, even in a setting of burned out grass, sparse vegetation, and tons of snakes. That's right, snakes. Not even rattlesnakes could ruin this moment. The last part of the date was in a hot tub that, because it was miles from anywhere, was not exactly hot. The water's temperature did nothing to damper the between Leslie and passion me. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. That doesn't mean it was actually a passionate moment. In reality, we did an embarrassingly bad job of kissing. We were both keenly aware that our families and millions of strangers were going to watch this one day soon. The world didn't need to see us going at it. Preparing to get in the hot tub provided me with another glimpse of her mischievous and impish humor. When I provocatively claimed I had been trying to steal a look through the sizable crack in the wooden dressing room where Leslie was changing into her bathing suit, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You seriously think you were the only one trying to sneak a peek?" That was part of the fun with Leslie. The moments of connection happened so fast and subtly, they felt like an inside joke that only we shared. When the most satisfying day yet of my time on The Golden Bachelor was over, Leslie was still very much on my mind. I couldn't think of anything or anyone else. My attraction to Leslie was well-rounded and grounded not only in the physical, but also in her energy. She was exciting to be with. That day up in the high desert involved some adventure, some speed, and a little bit of danger, and she was right along for the ride. She was 100% in. There was no apprehension. Above all else, though, I was attracted to her sense of humor, which was so much like my own. I made fun of her, she made fun of me, and we laughed our asses off. There was no malice in our ribbing. Not even when she teased me for getting us lost on the ATVs when I took a wrong turn. Only good-natured fun. It was real and pure, which made me wonder, was Leslie my person? All I knew for sure was that I couldn't wait to see her again, despite my strong feelings. For Leslie, I was disappointed in myself when I woke up the next day and my first thought was about her. It was the day of my third one date, this time with Faith. My philosophy throughout the entire course of the show had been to give my complete and undivided attention to whichever woman I was with in any given moment. I worked really hard at that. This day was supposed to be all about Faith. Instead, I wanted to know how Leslie felt. What was she thinking right then? There was nothing to do but get up, dust myself off, and try to set aside the experiences of the previous day to focus on Faith. So, with my heart in one place, I put my head in another. It helped a lot that we had planned the most extravagant itinerary I could ever have imagined. A vintage Bronco drive to a helicopter for an aerial tour of Orange County that would end in a landing on a luxury yacht anchored in the Pacific Ocean. Even the platter of nibbles on the boat was lavish. You know, the kind with huge hunks of Parmesan that cost $30 a pop, a far cry from the peanut butter and Ritz I was used to eating on a boat. But first we had the helicopter ride. The liftoff of the chopper and the view below were glorious. Faith, who has a fear of flying, gripped my arm tightly as the helicopter pilot expertly maneuvered around and through the skyscrapers of downtown LA. Usually so confident, she was quiet while we got a bird's eye view of landmarks like Dodger Stadium, SoFi Stadium, and the J. Paul Getty Museum. Next, we flew to the coastline and followed it north to Malibu before going out over the Pacific. The landscape was so breathtaking. Faith forgot her fear of heights. At first, she clung to me for protection. She never let go, but as her fear of flying subsided, her grasp became affectionate, and she started to ask questions. I could feel the difference. About a mile out to sea, our 60-foot yacht came into view. Faith thought I was lying when I pointed out the boat deck that was our landing spot. "You are kidding, right? You aren't going to land on that boat, are you?" she asked. "I'm not," I answered. "But the pilot is." As if that weren't over the top enough, on board there was champagne, a lavish charcuterie board, a rose, and a hot tub, most decadent. Lie, we had plenty of time to talk and get to know one another. The wind was brisk as we huddled together in the tub. Legs entwined with mine, she told me of her difficult childhood, and I was deeply moved by the success this strong woman had achieved in her lifetime. By this point, I had lost myself in opulence and totally given in to the fantasy. It was easy to forget we were on a TV show and imagine, for that brief moment, this alternate reality was my life. As I listened to Faith's story, I felt a tremendous respect and admiration for her and her accomplishments. There was a depth of character and a genuine quality in Faith that drew me in. As the day drew to a close, the yacht headed back to Malibu Pier. We were still over 3 miles out to sea when a 30-foot sailboat glided by, cutting across our stern. Somebody from the other boat yelled, "Give her the rose!" This wasn't the first time I'd been recognized in public. The minute it was announced on TV that I was the Golden Bachelor, people had started to come up to me. But in the middle of the ocean, as if I needed more proof of Bachelor Nation's reach, back at the harbor, a small group of people on the pier cheered as Faith and I stood up to kiss goodbye. I don't even know how they could see us on the top deck, which was easily 3 stories high. Apparently, no place was private anymore. The date's activities and atmosphere were a solid 10 out of 10, but my feelings for Faith didn't score quite as high. Reflecting on the day, I realized I hadn't laughed much. She tugged at my heartstrings when she told me about her childhood, and we certainly enjoyed each other's company. But the conversation was mostly serious and heavy. On the ride into shore, Faith confided in me that it was hard knowing I was dating other women. I could tell she was looking for assurances that I couldn't quite make. Later, I could not remember a single funny or humorous shared moment on the yacht. Was I just mentally fatigued, or was there simply no true connection between Faith and me? A teacher, rancher, podcaster, and radio personality, she had no shortage of fascinating experiences to talk about. And she was pretty, very pretty, which ironically might have been part of the problem. I've thought about this a lot, and I believe several factors led me to create a false perspective of Faith. I was hung up on my personal commitment to evaluate contestants' values, morals, and characteristics over her appearance. I was consciously trying not to be influenced by my physical attraction to Faith, thinking it was a superficial reason to want to be with her. I was so concerned about this issue, I'd even discussed it with Trista when she made a guest appearance the day of the pickleball tournament. Sandwiched between the p-ball and the cocktail party, I was lucky enough to have lunch with Trista, for whom I have a great deal of respect. In between bites of a sandwich, I said to Trista, "You've done this before. I am beginning to feel guilty about evaluating the women based on their physical characteristics." To me, it felt very superficial. Trista was very calm as she put down her sandwich and leveled her gaze at me. "Gerry, when I married Ryan, I was very physically attracted to him," she said. "That is a very important part of it. You can't leave that out of evaluating who you think you might want to spend the rest of your life with, because that's the start of good chemistry." Doesn't she was reasonable and genuinely sweet as she doled out solid advice. First, she said to remain objective mentally and to keep my options open. Second, she stressed that my being physically attracted to a woman mean I'm shallow. Physical attraction is important, so go with it. Third, don't look for the woman you can live with, look for the woman you can't live without. Then, true to BN tradition, she gave me her number and invited me to appear on her podcast. Not only was I tripped up by Faith's beauty the day of our one-on-to-one date, but I was also fighting any influence the high glam of the helicopter landing on a luxury yacht date might have on me. In doing so, though, I think I downplayed the excitement of being with Faith. I failed to separate the date glamour from the Faith glamour. Because of this failure, I did not allow myself to be open and let Faith into my heart as I might have. Basically, I couldn't get out of my own way. I was only able to make sense of the feelings I'd had on the date with Faith months later. At the time, though, I was completely confused and unsure of what I was feeling. One emotion I had no trouble identifying was the feeling of being alone, although not necessarily lonely. I guess even that feeling was nebulous. Pushed into new exciting experiences each day, I was nonetheless homesick for my safe comfort zone. I missed my dog, Cody. I missed pickleball and all my pickleball friends. I missed being normal. 3 mind-boggling dates with 3 exceptional women was certainly anything but. Goal-oriented, I was locked into my job, which was to find the next love of my life. There were many times throughout the course of the journey when I thought, Jesus, I'm just a grandpa from northern Indiana. How did I get myself into this spot? Later, when the show began airing, an article described me as a goober because of my slow, deliberate conversational style. I hope the writer didn't mean that as an insult. Either way, I took it as a compliment. I was focused on the task at hand. Because my head was so dedicated to the journey, I didn't have too many moments when I felt lonely. But after a while, without the surroundings I was truly comfortable in or the people in whom I could confide, I grew less confident. I kept giving myself the same pep talk over and over again. It's okay. You've run a goddamn marathon. You can do this. The day after my date with Faith brought me back to reality, but also reminded me of the importance of what I was doing in the most unexpected of places, an In-N-Out burger. I don't know if I was missing home or what, but I just wanted a burger. I wasn't more than one step into the place when this guy locked onto me. He was just an ordinary guy in his late 50s who looked to be a blue-collar worker from his cargo pants, worn baseball hat, and old tie shirt. When he gave me a nod of recognition, I assumed he had mistaken me for someone else or was just acknowledging another ordinary older man. I wasn't really thinking about it, being more preoccupied with my order. But after I sat down, the man approached my table. "Hey man, I wanted to wish you luck," he said. "You're representing the men of America in this. It's awesome to see you on TV, and I hope you find love." I had been warned that soon I wouldn't be able to go anywhere without being mobbed, but I hadn't believed it. I hadn't been able to imagine myself earning any real celebrity status, let alone recognition from a guy like the one before me now. "You really are a hero," he said. He might have been exaggerating, but this was the first time I heard someone verbalize the theme of The Golden Bachelor. While it felt great to know the message was resonating, I was surprised that someone like him was as invested as he appeared to be. As time went by, I realized that virtually every demographic seemed to have strong feelings about our season. That moment lifted my spirits, although exactly why I couldn't say at the time, except that it involved a simple act of kindness by a stranger. It felt like a fan cheering me on from the sidelines at mile 12 of a marathon. I knew the road ahead would be hard, and there might be times I would want to give up, but I was running this race for more than myself. The group date that night was at the Santa Monica Pier, which had a gleeful carnival atmosphere even before we spotted the iconic Ferris wheel. The low clouds of the night sky reflected the neon glitter of the amusement rides. I invited each of the remaining women to release her inner child, and it was a blast, just good old-fashioned fun. I played whack-a-mole with Susan, took a spin on the Ferris wheel with Teresa, braved the roller coaster with Ellen, did the ring toss with Sandra, and rode the sea dragon with Leslie. Both Ellen and Teresa said they were falling in love with me. I admitted to warm and fuzzy feelings toward them as well. In the work of staying open to possibilities for love, I had tried very hard not to bring Tony's memory into potential new relationships. I wasn't looking for Tony 2 or the anti-Tony, but in the back of my mind, it was hard not to compare my current situation, where I was truly falling for several women, at once, to my previous life, where I'd been totally committed to one. Woman from the age of 18 to 66. It was quite the transition. If I enjoyed my time with Ellen and Teresa, I had to admit the most exciting moment was with Leslie. Given an opportunity to talk and laugh, we always got a laugh in. She grew emotional, confessing that it had been a long time since she had experienced the feelings she was starting to have for me. While that should have been cause for celebration, Leslie explained that they were scaring her because she had been cheated on in the past. "I'm falling in love with you," she whispered during our final embrace, hugging me tight. "You're my girl," I whispered in return, believing in that moment that Leslie was indeed the one. No sooner had I exhaled relief and joy in Leslie's arms after our mutual expressions of commitment than the celebration of the night was sucked out by the thought of the next rose ceremony. I cannot express how bad I felt knowing that 3 of the remaining women would be gone in 24 hours. As the number of contestants dwindled, the rose ceremonies became shorter but much harder. By this point, I had gotten to know each of the women I was about to deny a rose. I knew how long they had been married before becoming widowed, and their favorite activities with their grandchildren. The same sensitive guy who had listened to their rees in recent days was about to give them the axe. These were people I genuinely cared about. I began to refer to the women collectively as my friends. They were my safe space on the show. We shared an unspoken understanding of the trials and tribulations that come with age. Every single one of us had been through something. Whenever I was with the group, I felt confident and in control of my emotions. I still feel that way today. As the days became weeks and the weeks turned months, I never stopped believing they were the most wonderful, graceful women in the world. Walking off the pier was as melancholy as running in had been jubilant. Thinking ahead to the rose ceremony, I got depressed, which immediately showed on my face. In general, I'm not a great liar. You can read my feelings on my mug as clearly as news on a ticker. We were down to where I only had good, genuine women who I believed had the right intentions for their time on the show. Having already eliminated anyone who had obvious disqualifiers, I was surrounded by women I was drawn to for one valid reason or another. But that was the journey, so I gave myself what seemed like my 500th pep talk. I knew Faith and Leslie were staying. That was a no-brainer. And I knew Sandra and Susan were going home. Sandra is a great, funny person, but we didn't have any real chemistry. By the time I had grown closer to Susan, it was too late in the journey. Both Sandra and Susan were firmly in the friend zone. The real soul-crushing decision was choosing between Teresa and Ellen. Both were pleasant and positive. Neither had any red flags. I could imagine either being a wonderful partner. It was crunch time, and I was once again sleep-deprived. Fog filled my thought process, and there wasn't room for both women. When my day finally ended in the early morning hours, I fell asleep feeling real sorrow over the impending loss of friends. My rest, however, was brief, way too brief. Before I knew it, I was awake and getting ready to face the challenge of the rose ceremony. I knotted my tie, purple, a color I never imagined I'd be wearing, and fiddled with my matching pocket square, an accessory previously not even in my vocabulary. I felt like I was getting dressed for graduation. I had a very difficult time deciding on the concepts for my speech for this rose ceremony, though every previous time they had come quickly. I knew that I felt somewhat depressed about the need to send 3 women home that day. In my mind, the day marked the end of the first half of my journey. The hard work half. I hoped, as I moved away from the mirror and toward the door, that the rest of The Golden Bachelor would be a pleasurable denouement, like reading the final pages of a good novel after the climax. And yes, I prayed the ending would be happily ever after. I knew that if I didn't keep hope in my heart, I would lose my way on a journey that was destined to change my life. The first part of the day was filled with press interviews, something I'd had no clue about before we started the show. Talking to a whole slew of media outlets, from print to podcasts, was now part of my duties. As I chatted with reporters, I hoped my anxiety about the upcoming rose ceremony didn't undermine my attempt at affability. One bright spot was a surprise Zoom call with my daughters, and granddaughters a little after we started to tape. That really lifted my spirits and gave me courage, even though they had no way of knowing what I was going through. We hadn't been in contact since I'd started the show. I missed my family terribly. Although we couldn't talk about the show, they asked me general questions about my well-being and if I was in good spirits. "I'm having the time of my life," I told them. There was no way to explain my complicated feelings, and I didn't want them to worry about me until we spoke next. I didn't need to unload on them to feel better. It was good enough just to hear their voices and see their faces. Another morale booster was having a talk with Jesse Palmer before things got started. Nobody better ever say anything bad about Jesse. He is my man crush. To start with the superficial, he's a handsome guy and very composed. More importantly, Jesse is kind and has a very wholesome outlook on life. He also has a great family. Those are all qualities I admire. Recognizing that I was beating myself up, he sought me out. He knew how I constantly worried about my choices and the direction I was taking. Using the trailer, dressing room like a locker room, we had a pregame conversation to break the tension. "You're doing the best you can," he said, "so give yourself a break." Jesse was not there to offer advice. However, in rare circumstances, such as the evening of the talent show, he did offer perspective. Jesse brought sincerity to every conversation and situation. He was unique in that his companionship had a calming effect on me. I felt like I had a friend covering my back when Jesse was around, so I felt a bit of relief after our conversation. Still, the rose ceremony was every bit as gut-wrenching as I had expected it would be. With a heavy heart, I sent Sandra and Susan home. However, it was Ellen's departure that was by far the most difficult decision I'd made yet. Ellen was a sweetheart, and we had a lot in common, like a pass scion for pickleball. I couldn't give a better reason for sending her home than a sense that we didn't have the chemistry necessary to become a fully romantic couple. I wasn't sure if Teresa was my person either, but I was more sure that Ellen wasn't. At the end of the ceremony, the only one who appeared happy was Teresa. She was beaming from ear to ear above her rose. Although Faith and Leslie also received roses, they both looked pretty grim. I wondered if the inherent insecurity of this process was getting to them. I sure knew it was getting to me.